Welcome to Making of the Industrial Society, and remember the word industrial means factories, a time in history where factories are being created, pollution's taking place, city conditions are booming, which means there's a lot of cities being built, and at the same time things are changing in the countryside. Look at this cartoon. It's not really a funny one. In this case, it's actually sad. It shows that in Indonesia, little girls are being taken to work with their moms in order to make shoes. You can see Nike in the background. Nike got in trouble a few years ago for paying really low wages to women and children and not getting any profits. In this slide, you can see this is all about the vocabulary word agrarian. Agrarian refers to agriculture, things that are being grown in the ground. And at this time, for industrialization, the countries are now changing. You're seeing that cities are becoming really huge. They're big cities like London, places that are happening like in various parts of Europe, other places like Belgium, for example, Paris, places even in Germany. Lots of big towns start to be created where lots of job opportunities. In the right-hand side, you can see there's a factory in the background with lots of smoke. This is a negative image of the Industrial Revolution, but they're creating all kinds of various products to sell. It could be creation of ships, it could be creation of clothing, it could be even just simple things like creation of things that you would see in the normal household. So a very big time for creating goods. This slide refers to crop rotation. Rotation means to turn or to move around. In this case, you can see the arrows going from the right to the bottom, to the left, and up. This is showing you an example of how to properly rotate crops in order to make sure that the soil, the dirt, is properly being changed so that it can keep the nutrients inside the ground. In this case, you can see what's really important is something called nitrogen. In order for successful farming to take place, you need the nitrogen in the soil. And then you can grow things like onions, turnips, celery, carrots, tomatoes, potatoes. You cannot grow the same crop in one particular plot. If you do that, you will exhaust the soil or you'll take all the nutrients out of it and you will have a major problem. Take a look at the dates. You're looking at the time period from 1760 up until 1914. 1914 is a date to remember as that will be World War I, and that's something that we'll really focus on in this class. The image to the left-hand side shows a guy on a table. It looks like he's inventing something. In the back left, you can see the steam engine. To the far right, you could see smokestacks, which means factories. You can also see a train. It's celebrating the positive things about the Industrial Revolution. Keep in mind some of these inventions that we discussed in your presentations are things like the steam engine, the cotton gin, which takes out the seeds a lot quicker out of cotton, and it makes the textile industry go even faster. More people want to buy clothing. So back in the day, that actually increased slavery. Okay, you'll see the railroad is able to transport goods at a cheaper rate, and you'll see major things like corporations. Corporations is a fancy name for businesses, and in this case right here, again, you're going to see lots of really powerful companies or corporations starting to be created during this time in history, and of course we will focus on the city of London. Here is a map on the left-hand side. You can see the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and as you get to the right-hand side, you can see that the colors start to intensify, which show more factories. Most likely also populations are going to increase because people are starting to experience a better life, a more comfortable life. So at the same time, more farming. Again, we talked about cotton being the really big thing. We talked about crop rotation in another slide. You will start to see some workers becoming very skilled at certain jobs, but most of your factory workers were all immigrants, meaning that they're from other countries. They didn't have very many skills, so what they did was they worked in the factory for very low wages and didn't take things like breaks all the time or were treated very badly. But eventually later too, you can see that England is the birth of the revolution for the Industrial Revolution because of the geography. If you look around the country, you'll see they're surrounded in water. It's important for them to be able to take these goods, sell them, and they have ships all around the country to be able to take them to other countries and sell them. So you can see England is a very important country for this particular time period. Ecological, remember ecology refers to kind of the environment, nature, what's going on with it. To the left-hand side, you see a picture of coal, but keep in mind, before we used coal, we used wood. And what started to happen was because so many people were cutting down trees, you have something called deforestation. Again, if you think of the word forest, like lots of trees, deforestation means when you use too much trees, you start cutting them down and the trees cannot grow back fast enough. So we start to use coal, which is to the left-hand side, and this looks very similar to what you would see like in a barbecue, like a charcoal. And this is going to be the new type of item that is used for energy. It is super bad for the environment as it causes lots of pollution. If you work around it, you could get cancer. It's very dangerous for your lungs. And again, we will see this type of soot, S-O-O-T, that was mentioned in presentations, which gets into your lungs, onto your skin, and it's not good for you. But again, if you watch the movie Sherlock Holmes, you'll see lots of factory smoke in the background. And again, it was not regulated by the government at that particular time. Creating machines to make standards of living better. Remember that a lot of the inventions were created for people to live better lives. In this case, corporations and businesses will make so much money because they're looking to see how they can do things much easier. Water power and coal was used to power machines, so huge machines are being created to create things faster, more efficiently. And again, iron ore is used to eventually create iron products, which are create buildings and structures for as it mentions there. And then again, you also get things like steamboats that are being created to be able to go onto rivers much more easily. Even canals are being built during this time, and a harbor would be like a port city, a place where the boats would come in, they would get the products, and then they would take off and go to other countries to sell them. San Diego, we have lots of harbors here. If you go down to Oceanside up in North County, we have lots of harbors. And again, of course, New York City is a major harbor. England, with it surrounded with all these different ports, it's easy for them to be able to trade and sell lots of products via sea. Colonies are always taken over by a particular country. In this case, you have to remember that in the late 1700s, early 1800s, the country of England is going to take over other places in the world. India will be a very big example. They also even went into parts of China, various parts of Africa, and we'll talk more about this when we get to the late 1800s. But because they were able to take over India, they were able to get products for free. And a lot of the people that were in the country of India were the people who kind of ended up being the laborers, the people who worked for very little pay, for bad conditions. But you can see on the bottom right, this cotton is being taken from India, and it's also being used to make clothing in the factory. The British were able to make tons of money because they used child labor, and they didn't pay kids very much money. And on the left-hand side, you can see some really interesting dresses. You guys might laugh at the way the dresses looked, but those were super expensive and made to be really quality type of clothing. On the top right, you can see looks like cotton up there on the top right. And again, also another product that we talked about in class was tea. So tea was another product that was taken from India and brought in and sold around everywhere. Lipton tea is one particular example. So you will be tested on inventions, so make sure that you look at your worksheet. The 3 items that you see right here are all different types of products that spin cotton and are used to make clothing. Make sure that you look in your book for what specifically the spinning jenny does, what the power loom does, what the flying shuttle does, and of course it's very evident what the steam engine does. But I will test you to see that you're looking in the book and making sure what those 3 items are and how they're different from each other. So that's for you to make sure that you do, okay? This is one of the most important inventions for the Industrial Revolution. Here's the steam engine. Look at the picture carefully. I will definitely probably show you a picture on the test. This again requires the fact that you need a very large space in order for it to work. So again, we looked at the size of our classroom and said that if you remove the ceiling, that particular steam engine would probably fill up the upstairs as well as the downstairs in my classroom. And again, all these things are used to create energy. We talked about water and coal, which is why you see all the smoke in the cities. So just make sure that this is what gets put into a lot of machines, ranging from even a steamboat, even like things like trains, and even things like factories for clothing and things like that. Here's another example of the steam engine added to what's called a power loom. By adding these 2 things together, you could produce clothing at a very fast rate. And also, you can see that there were women used in some of these factories with a male boss. It's still dangerous for a woman to work in a factory situation like this. And it was looked down upon. So a lot of the poorer women were the ones that were used in the factories. We talked about iron and steel, and so these are 2 important things to build bridges, to build boats, to build structures, and especially buildings. So again, we talked about how England had lots of iron ore, and because they had lots of iron ore, this is one of the reasons why England becomes the first country to industrialize. So again, on the bottom left, you can see a very famous boat down in San Diego called the Star of India. Up on the top, you can see a really strong bridge that's being used to be able to connect areas together. Cars can go across it eventually, and again, it helps connect land spaces together and other types of things in terms of buildings are created and stuff that we still see today. Here's one particular invention called the rocket on the top left-hand side there. And again, this will eventually turn into what's called a train or the railroads. Again, as much as they are very positive, it's a very American thing. It was in England as well as the United States, but again, we're focusing on England more so for this class. You could take goods, put them into the train, and you could put them very cheaply. They can go very fast and very efficiently. So during this time, again, you can see eventually the bullet train will be created in places like Japan and Germany. And again, it helps people travel across places at a faster rate for cheap. And you can also have a business make lots of money because they're selling goods cheap for cheap and much more faster and efficient. The factory. Again, we keep talking about the factory, but remember, before this time period, people would stay at home. They would create items. Their little children would, the wife, the husband, and they would go to a local place, turn in the fixed products, and get money in exchange for that. It took too long. And when we talk about supply and demand, that's a big deal. That means whatever people want, if you can't make something fast enough, the price goes up. So the factory was able to keep a lot of products for a lower cost. And so by a machine making products much quicker, eventually things will become much more easier to get. And so again, you can see homes could not hold these huge machines as we talked about. And eventually you'll have the machinery, you'll have people working in the factory, it'll be all under one roof, and your boss and all the managers can make sure that all the products are being created quickly, efficiently. The problem with this, you're doing the same thing all day long, and it doesn't take very much skill or education. So lots of immigrants and people that were poor or uneducated worked in the factories. And again, this was grueling work. It would be very boring and difficult for you to do every single day. And to top it off, it's also dangerous, and there weren't really strong rules about the workplace at that particular period of time. You can see women again in this particular clip. Here is a picture of a type of people called the Luddites. This was a situation that took place in England, and not just in England, but in various places around the world. In this particular case, they're called the Luddites. They were angry workers. They were upset at how the machines were taking away jobs. So one of the things that they did is they went in the evening, destroyed the machines in hopes that they wouldn't get caught. Sure enough, they were caught and they were executed, killed. And again, if a person loses their job and they have a family, it's very difficult to feed your family, especially if you have a lot of children. So in this particular case, it's a sad story, but it also shows you what a new invention can do in a bad way. At one point in time, the postal office, like that delivers mail, had a difficult time when online sales started to take place. Luckily, they've changed a lot of their management, and they're still competitive, but you can see how businesses get put out when new things come in. For example, we used to have Blockbuster video stores. Those are all gone now because everyone streams online. Netflix is another thing that has changed the way that people watch films and things like that. So you can see how businesses that are created make other businesses shut down. Entrepreneur is a vocabulary word that you need to know. It's a person who creates a business. What happens is you invest money in hopes that the business is going to create a profit or lots of money. You can see that mass production on the top left is when you take various people, your workers inside the factory, you put them in a line, and you pass down all the things for them to work on very quickly. We saw the funny example with I Love Lucy and the chocolates in the beginning when we looked at this lecture together. And again, a corporation's just another fancy word for a business. On the bottom, you can see monopolies. I will definitely test you on this. It's not a good thing because at this time it would be a company controlling one business and making tons of money from it. We joked around about the Rockefellers, and I told you guys if you ever meet someone with the last name Rockefeller, just marry them, okay? Again, there's a lot of very powerful families with the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Mellons that have made lots of money, and because there were no rules in terms of how to run a business. Again, we talked about like if one person owns a cell phone company, right, and there were no other companies to compete, then they would have a monopoly. They could charge whatever price. So we do things like that today with water. We have all kinds of companies that sell water. We have all kinds of companies that sell power. We have a lot of companies that sell different carrier services for cell phones and so on. Population growth, because people are starting to work and make money. They have more money in their pockets, so the standards of living are better. People are eating better food, which means, again, the population's going to go up. And at the same time, not everybody was experiencing this wealth. So it's very easy to see on the top left up there, you can see that it looks, like an okay situation. But on the bottom left with the real photo, this is the one where we counted about 9 people living in a very cramped space. It's dirty. If a fire happened, everybody would die. It gets really hot in here. If somebody's sick, you can catch a cold really easily. And again, it's very uncleanly. It's not safe. And so a lot of the immigrants lived in really bad situations. And they were super poor. And again, the city shows extreme wealth, but at the same time, it shows extreme poverty. You can go down to downtown San Diego and see this with like really nice hotels, and then you'll turn around the corner and you'll see homeless people living in tents on the street. So again, the cities have, both super wealthy and super poor. Here's a picture of a family. You can see what it looked like. This is an immigrant family. You can tell on the left-hand side, these 2 younger kids are probably working on something. You can see a young girl kind of in a crib in the back. The dad, a small closet. Many of you would hate to be in a situation where you lived this close with your mom and dad with barely any privacy. So again, standards of living were better, but at the same time, not everybody was experiencing this, and this is pretty typical for an immigrant family here. This is a fancy word. We did not go over this in class. It's called demographic shift. This refers to population. So although people's diets are getting better, people are getting more money, you have to understand that inside the city, it was a different story. The population was actually decreasing because at this time, who would want to raise a family in a city? The city was dangerous. As we talked about, there's narrow streets. If you're a female, you never walk alone. And at the same time, there was no such thing as birth control. So there was no way to control whether or not a woman would get pregnant. So in this case, you'll see that some women had made the choice to try to get an abortion, which is to get rid of the baby. But at this time, people were very religious, and this was really bad to do. So people tried various methods to try not to get pregnant, and at the same time, the population does decrease in the city, while worldwide, the population is going up. So we call this a demographic shift. Urbanization is a fancy word for city. Okay, we talked about rural, R-U-R-A-L, as country, and urban as city. So in this situation here, from the 1760s to the 1914s, you can see that all these particular items are happening in the city. Air pollution, water pollution, and if you don't have clean water, you can get disease, specifically cholera, which we'll talk about in class next time. Fire. Look at this building. If one of the buildings caught on fire, it wasn't strange for other buildings to also catch on fire. And of course, thieves. Pickpocketing means for people to go and take things out of your pocket. And it was very common for people to get robbed in the city. It still is something today that happens, and you need to be extremely careful when you go to the city. When you go to college, you may even want to dress down when you're walking around so that no one really bothers you. Sometimes if you wear really expensive jewelry or purses, you're a target. So you have to be very aware of your surroundings. For any of you guys that live in the city, you know more about this. About 50 million people are going to come to Americas from Europe for various reasons. Some left because they lost everything. Some wanted a new adventure, a new experience. And they came to America to really start new dreams. So, of course, the Statue of Liberty is a really big deal in the United States as it symbolizes all these new immigrants coming to the Americas in hopes of a better opportunity in life. Many of the Europeans went through Ellis Island in New York, which is really close to the Statue of Liberty. And if you were Asian, you would go to an area called Angel Island. The check-in process was really difficult. And again, they would ask you how much money you had, if you had any sickness. They would ask you all kinds of questions. If they didn't think that your questions checked out, they would make you stay in an area for a few days and try to send you back. Otherwise, you were welcomed into the U.S. and you lived in what was called ethnic enclaves. I will test you on this. Ethnic enclaves are communities that are created in order for immigrants to live in and feel comfortable. So you can see in this picture right here, this is, again, a Vietnamese ethnic enclave. This could be in the area of Los Angeles. You can see a Thai restaurant to the right, or a Thai sign to the right here. And it also just shows you that this is an Asian community, and you can buy all kinds of different Asian products and things like that. If you go up to Los Angeles, if you go to Chicago, to New York, you'll always find little areas where certain ethnicities live, and these are called ethnic enclaves. So in just a moment, I'm going to show you a few other ones too. But if you go into the areas of like Convoy, if you go downtown to Little Italy, if you go down to other places throughout the United States, it's not strange to find places like this. So next picture, here's a famous one in the area of Convoy. This is Zion Market, and I'm probably saying that incorrectly, so my Korean students, I'm sorry. But Zion Market has a lot of various Korean products inside here, as well as Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Thai types of products in here. And, you know, the Asian community comes here as well as a lot of other people to go check out and buy things that are familiar to them and their home. Here's another slide. This is in San Diego too. This is an area called Barrio Logan. And again, it's a large area that there's a park and stuff like that, but it has a lot of things that you would see from Mexican culture. So off to the left-hand side, you can see a picture of Frida Kahlo. And again, there's a lot of mural art here. It's very symbolic for Mexican people, and of course, you guys know we're really close to the border. So again, you can even find little street tacos and little types of things that pop up that, like Tosti Locos, for example. And also to the right here is Little Italy. This is an Italian community area in San Diego. It's super popular, as you guys know. There's a lot of nice Italian restaurants there. I recommend a place called Bencoto Kitchen. And again, it's a great place to go check out some art. You can get some really good coffee and things like that. You can also take a trolley to go ride there. And the last slide is a picture of a cartoon that we will discuss in class. Make sure that you guys study and get proper sleep. I wish you the best of luck on your finals, and be good.